Hi, welcome or welcome back to Books and Bocadillos. My name is Mariandrea, and this is the Nonfiction November book tag. I actually tried to film this tag earlier. It is midnight, and actually, technically December 1st, just a few minutes into December 1st. I recorded this on November 30th, but it didn't work out, so here I am, before my bedtime, trying to wrap up my thought on Nonfiction November through this tag, which I don't think I was tagged in, but I wanted to do it anyway because I really enjoyed the Nonfiction November event and have enjoyed it for several years now. I wanted to get in on the fun, so better late than never, huh? Question number 1. Oh, this tag was created by Bookish Travels. Question number 1. What motivated you to pick up your first nonfiction book? Can you remember it? The first nonfiction book that I remember really loving was actually part of like a reference set, or like not a reference set. It was like a collection of books, and they were like anthologies. One of them was nonfiction. It was actually a how-to book. So it was like how to make stamps out of potatoes, how to make, how to turn aluminum tins, like from canned vegetables or canned tomatoes, and how to turn those into pencil holders or little like aluminum decorative tins. My parents also were great parents in the sense that they always made sure that we had an encyclopedia in our house. And this is the nerdiest thing I can say about myself, I think. I loved reading the encyclopedia. I was so grateful that we had so much like reference materials in our house. And the encyclopedia was a treasure. And I would get on the weekends, I would grab a volume, like letter A, read it, spend my weekend just absorbing the encyclopedia. And then I loved making my way through all the letters of that World Book Encyclopedia. So that was like my favorite nonfiction read. Now, other than like dictionaries and encyclopedias and how-to manuals or like books, when I was in elementary school, I remember I was in the United States, here in the Rio Grande Valley and South Texas. And we were supposed to do a research project on American Indians. And we were supposed to pick a First Nation group that we wanted to research. And I always had a curiosity for the First Nation people that I'm connected to through my ancestry. So I remember not really knowing where to start. But it was really difficult to find American Indians of northern Mexico. So I really enjoyed reading nonfiction books chronicling the history of the First Nations and the people of Texas, and I really enjoyed learning about the different nations, the different groups of indigenous people in Texas. So that was one of my favorite reading experiences. How do you choose your next nonfiction book? I usually go into like rabbit holes. So, for example, if I'm reading a fiction book, like maybe a historical fiction story, and then something in the historical fiction catches my eye or my imagination and I want to learn more about it, then I'll go and look for nonfiction books that tie with the historical fiction piece that I'm reading. So let's say, for example, The Women. I was reading The Women by Kristen Hanna, and questions come about the Vietnam War. Then I might look for a book about the Vietnam War, or, a certain theme or topic specific to that time period. That's just an example. Other examples are sometimes maybe there's like sometimes if there's like a cultural part of the fictional story, I may want to either pick up like a cookbook or a history book or a political book. Mariana Enriquez, for example, with Our Share of Night, that book was so full of historical and political things. Like it was read like historical / political horror. And that book had me wanting to like research books, nonfiction books about Argentinian history, the politics of Argentina. It made me really long for that book that I used to have in college for Argentinian history. So things like that will come up when I'm reading fiction, and that's usually how I end up going into like my nonfiction TBRs and like adding to my nonfiction TBR, looking for the next great nonfiction book. Question number 3, do you take notes or annotate nonfiction books? Not typically. I tend to annotate fiction more than nonfiction. I can't remember the last nonfiction book I annotated. It's rare. Now, cookbooks, I annotate all the time. I'll annotate my thoughts about the recipe, my rating of the recipe, any adjustments that I made, any substitutions that I made. I'll write tips to myself on how to make it better next time if there's improvement needed. But yeah, I love annotating cookbooks. And I always kind of think, who's going to inherit these books when I die? And what are they going to think of all my little notes in my cookbooks? Question number 4. Have you read a nonfiction book that has challenged your beliefs and assumptions? Yes, there's 2 books that I want to talk about. One is The Year of the Tiger by Alice Wong. And I just want to say, Alice Wong. Alice Wong's collection of essays, Disability, Visibility, is one of my favorite nonfiction books. I think that's a must read. But her memoir, The Year of the Tiger, which I read, I think last year was The Year of the Tiger. I read during the Year of the Tiger at the beginning of the year. I love that book, that memoir. That was a memoir. But one of the parts that challenged me is there was an essay that she wrote in that memoir where she talked about her views on plastic straws. And that really challenged me because at the time I was like trying to get rid of like plastic straws in my life. I didn't want them to exist in the world, and my environmental like gears were like going kind of crazy because she was saying how she disagreed with the environmentalists' push for not having plastic straws accessible to people in restaurants. And I was challenged, and she really did change my perspective. She widened, gave me like a different way to look at things and realize that things are more nuanced. There's no such thing as like black and white in terms of good or bad. There's always diverse needs, and it made me more compassionate, and it made me rethink my stance on plastic straws at restaurants. The second book is The Home Place by Drew Lanham. Drew Lanham is a naturalist, and in very similarly to the way Alice Wong challenged my personal beliefs and my views, so did Drew Lanham in The Home Place. It's also a memoir, and he gave criticisms for the vegan lifestyle. Now, I'm vegan, and I just celebrated my 10th anniversary as a vegan. And so when I read this book, I was probably, 7 or 8 years as a vegan. And he talked about how he didn't think that veganism was the answer for environmental issues. And I don't think veganism is like the only answer. I think it's maybe part of a larger set of things that impact our overall environment. But he was not like, I don't know, he didn't seem like he was very friendly with vegans. And he really had a lot to say about the vegan lifestyle. So I felt personally challenged, and I still think about him. Every time I eat tofu, I think about The Home Place and Drew Lanham, and how, according to Drew Lanham, soybeans are a part of the environmental climate change problem. So every time I have tofu or soy, I think of Drew Lanham. Question number 5. How do you feel about the intersection of storytelling and factual content in non-fiction? Oh man, I wish I could have these books to show. I have 2 that I want to talk about, and the books are not here with me, so I'm going to do my best. The first book that I want to talk about is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is also a memoir, and Carmen Maria Machado tells the story of a very specific point in time in her life, in this relationship in the dream house, and the way she tells the story through different, like, she kind of shifts this experience in the dream house through like different metaphors. It was really, really interesting. So that was a part of like storytelling, just all the different ways she could tell the story she did. And it was storytelling, but it was also nonfiction. It's based on true events. So that was really fascinating. It's one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Highly recommend In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. The other one that I think is really, really great is Magical/Realism by Vanessa, Angelica Villarreal. So in Magical/Realism, Vanessa Angelica Villarreal writes, also it's her memoir told in essays, and she tells stories about her family history, but she also tells stories about cultural touchstones through which she has been able to reflect on her life, her childhood, her memories, what's real and what's imagined. So she tells stories so well. She has like smaller like essays or stories between chapters, and I'm trying to think, like there's one about being a daughter, and the way she tells, like she uses a lot of storytelling. It almost feels like, sometimes it feels like you're reading a story, but you know it's about her life, but it just is so beautifully told. I don't know, that book feels like it's got cuentos, and it has, like, it's part reference, it's a collection of essays, it's a memoir, it's got so much, it's doing so much, and it's so well done. So, I mean, I love it. That is Magical / Realism by Vanessa Angelica, Villarreal. Question number 6. Is there a topic you wish authors would explore? Yes, but I don't want to talk about it because I feel like maybe that's my work to do. I think I've found like a potential thesis for if and when I go back. Well, not if, when. It's a matter of when. When I go back to school for translation, I want to do some translation work in my lifetime, and so I found a topic that I think is really, really interesting. So has to do with grief and the way we experience grief, and language is a big part of how we express our grief. So that's kind of like the general gist, but there's some really cool things I want to study and do. Question number 7. Do you incorporate insights from nonfiction into your daily life? Yes. I have a lot of books listed here. So, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, MD. I think he's a surgeon. Being Mortal by Atul Gawande is a nonfiction book about end-of-life planning and being prepared for your end of life and understanding the end of life process, palliative care, hospice care, long-term care. And I work in that setting. I work as a hospice social worker currently, and I've been in the medical field for a really long time now. So that's a book that has, I think, impacted my work. Real Self-Care. Real Self-Care by Pooja Lakshmin, MD. She is a psychiatrist, and this is a transformative program for redefining wellness. This is the best book on self-care I've read. I highly, highly recommend this book. The subheading here is Crystals, Cleanses, and Cool Baths Not Included. I love this book. See, I've tabbed it. This has a lot of really great tools for self-care, for preventing and coping with burnout. So, highly recommend. This is one that I refer to and I think about on a daily basis. I actually really wanted to buy copies of this and gift them to everyone I know, all my girlfriends, but a lot of them don't read, so I think maybe it would be a waste of money. But I highly recommend. This is the kind of book that I would buy and want to give to everybody if only they were interested in reading a book. Rest is Resistance, another book I have right here. I have my stash of books I took with me to the conference. So this is Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Tricia Hersey, the founder of the Nap Ministry. Need I say more? I don't think we take enough naps. Rest is not a part of our culture in America, in the United States of America. So seeing rest as resistance, as part of liberation, breaking the bonds of colonization and slavery, and grind culture. So this is a really, really great book. The Checklist Manifesto, also by Atul Gawande. I love that little book. It's just a little short book on why checklists are important. And when I first read it, I could not stop like making checklists. I think checklists are a good tool. So I think about it a lot. Defectors. I don't have my copy because I actually loaned that out to a friend. Because I loved it so much. And Defectors is written by Paola Ramos, and she's a journalist, and she is part Cuban, part Mexican, and she talks about what it means for Latinos and Latinos swinging to the far right agenda in American politics. Why that is, and she really is. I think I've said this before on my channel. She's very clear-eyed and nuanced about it, and I know I've been asked for a review of this book, and I do intend to review it. I'm just waiting for my copy back after my friend reads it. But I really, really love that book. I think about it. I've been thinking about it on a daily basis since I read it in late October. And then finally, Wintering by Katherine May. That book is like over there. I love Wintering. Wintering changed my life when I first read it. Wintering is the reason why I'm motivated to have early mornings in the winter. It's why I take hot baths in the winter. It's why I enjoy, well, I've always enjoyed, but ever since I read it, even more so, like polar dips, like swimming into the cold ocean. Well, as cold as it can be in South Texas, right? But it's cold for us here in the middle of winter. And singing, like appreciating birdsong when it comes. And yeah, I really enjoy that book, and I think about it quite a bit, especially in the winter, in preparing for winter. I love it. Question number 8, choose just one book, and it said just one book from your nonfiction collection to highlight. So it's this one. Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant by Roz Chast, a memoir. This is New York Times bestseller, National Book Award finalist, and National Book Critics Circle Award winner. This is a graphic memoir. So it's a story that's told through kind of like cartoon strip drawings, some photographs. There's photographs. The back of this, let me see. Well, I'll read this inside flap. The #1 New York Times bestselling award-winning graphic memoir by New Yorker cartoonist Roz Chast about her parents' final years. Roz Chast and her parents were practitioners of denial. If you don't ever think about death, it will never happen. Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant is the story of an only child watching her parents age well into their 90s and die. A longtime New Yorker cartoonist, Chast combines drawings with family photos and documents chronicling the long goodbye that, however expected, always seems to come as a surprise. While the particulars are Chastian, a deeply anxious father and blindly overbearing mother, the themes are universal. Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant is about the moment in adult life when the child must become the parent. It's about transitioning from the family home to an institution, hiring strangers to provide the most personal care, and sorting through the accumulated objects, memories of a lifetime. An incredibly moving portrait of two lives at their end and an only child coping as best she can. Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant is as rife with laughs as it is with tears. Now featuring the celebrated epilogue that first appeared in the New Yorker, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant shows the full range of Roz Chast's talent as a cartoonist and storyteller. I picked up this book because sometimes I have themes for myself. So I remember I was like, okay, I want to read books from the 1000 Books to Read Before You Die list that ask a question, titles that ask a question. So I read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And then this is the next one that I had planned to pick up, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant by Roz Chast. And then the next one that's coming up is Are You Somebody by Nuala O'Phelan. But so I just finished it. I started this a few months back, and I've been slowly making my way through it. What I read in the flap pretty much sums it up, and I might just highlight a little section there, but I also want to share from the 1000 Books to Read Before You Die. From this book, this is what James Mustich says. Since her work as a cartoonist began appearing in The Village Voice in the New Yorker in the late 1970s, Roz Chast's distinctive combination of scraggly line work, schlumpy figures, and off-kilter frame of mind has made her a singular presence in American humor. Her single-panel cartoons often involve absurdist disjunctions between image and caption. A portrait of an utterly mundane family, for instance, on an utterly nondescript couch, is labeled "The Cradle of Mankind." Yet the laughter they provoke is frequently tinged with slight distress, for her artistry illustrates, albeit with comic nonchalance, how ill or at least how oddly equipped we are for the enormity of life. Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant is Chast's first full-length book project, and it brings her peculiar gifts to bear on a theme particularly suited to them: the end days of her parents and her own shifty reactions to their senescence and mortality. Prompted by the unprecedented intimacy of the material, Chast imbues her graphic memoir with an astonishing honesty and emotional eloquence. She really, really does. Extending her idiosyncratic perspective on everyday life to the most dumbfounding subject of all, everyday death. In one finally encapsulated set piece after another, Chast tells the story of her quirky, prickly parents, Elizabeth and George, school teachers whose codependence alienated their daughter, but sustained them till their final farewells. Along the way, she chronicles a lost era of Brooklyn life, not the Brooklyn Chast writes of artists or hipsters or people who made and bought $8 chocolate bars. This was deep Brooklyn, the Brooklyn of people who have been left behind by everything and everyone. Simply seeing her depiction of a retail establishment labeled Bruised Fruit Store or a bank passbook with the legend Flatbush Scrimpers calls to mind poignant and pregnant realities of 20th century urban life. Her page layouts are alluringly varied, from traditional 9-panel matrices to full-page spreads. The cathartic image of her dad welcoming his wife home from the hospital is breathtaking. And everything in between. One radical move is to deploy large blocks of distinctively hand-lettered text alongside a single illustration, like some perverse version of a Beatrix Potter tale. Chast's anecdotes about her daughterly duties as her mother and father age and their bodies fail are unsentimental. She is hard on both herself and her parents for their less than optimal and stubborn choices. Yet, tender, wry, yet mournful, and powerfully resonant, the unique details of the Chast household assume a universal significance, especially for any reader who has shared similar experiences. This book is a bold guidebook for a journey every child of aging parents has to undertake, leavened with courage and uncertainty, anger and angst, regrets, and small victories. The dynamics in this household remind me a lot of one of my favorite movies of all time, Amelie. So it's very much like Amelie's parents and Amelie. A lot of that same family dynamic plays out in the Chast household. So you have Roz Chast as the only child, kind of like the way Amelie grew up and found herself. And then you also have her very quirky, complicated parents with their quirks, their the idiosyncrasies. And so it's really, really interesting. Now, I did laugh out loud, and I was just having dinner with a friend earlier. I was telling her that I read this book, and I was telling her that there was a part in this book that made me laugh out loud. So I've mentioned on my channel, I recently had a fall, injured my foot, was walking with like a boot, and then lately I've been walking with these shoes that are kind of like look like Crocs. And I was working and I went to go do a home visit, and I was visiting an older couple, and the wife asked me about my shoes, she had seen me in my boot the previous time I visited, and so she was asking me like, oh, how's your foot doing? I see you're not wearing your boot. And I'm like, oh yeah, these shoes are very comfortable because they're wide and it doesn't put pressure on my foot. So she made a comment to me that when I read this, I thought about that experience with this client, and it made me laugh out loud. So there's a storyline here. It's a rare sex talk. So Roz is having a phone conversation with her mother, and she illustrates it through cartoons, right? So it says, they say, the mom is saying, they say you can tell the degree of a woman's sexuality from her shoes. Look at mine, pure beetle crushers. Mom, that's absurd. My friend Gloria Zuckerman told me that the other day. She always wears the highest heels, and you see an old lady wearing heels, and she's always surrounded by men. Even now, she's in a facility in Sheepshead Bay, but she has admirers. High heels, they give off a signal that you're available. Roz Chast, the daughter, says, that is just stupid. The mom says, I'm just repeating what Gloria told me. I have to start dinner now, so I'll say goodbye. Click. And then Roz Chast, the daughter, looks down at her shoes, and she's wearing these, Crocs looking shoes, kind of like, they look like the ones that I was wearing. So when I saw that, I just laughed, because I'm like, just the parallels, the way women perceive sexuality and what that means and how you communicate with what you wear. It's kind of crazy, but it made me think about, when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, that was me realizing that I was wearing these shoes for comfort. And the person that I was talking to made a comment about how, they're not that pretty. And maybe, it was just, there were some things happening in that I sensed it, but I wasn't quite sure. And then when I read that, I was like, oh, it's funny. So anyway, that's the book that I wanted to highlight. And I'm not tagging anybody. It's December 1st. Nonfiction November is over. I think everybody that wanted to do this tag has done this tag, and I'm not going to tag anybody, but thank you so much for watching. I will be recording more videos in the morning or tomorrow or sometime during the day. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Hasta la próxima.